I purchased a small 3800 watt inverter generator, and I want to use it with my motorhome because I don't want to run the larger generator all the time. And I can use this for other things as well. So if I just want to tag it along and just run it once in a while, just to keep it going, that was the plan. Well, what happened was when I plugged the generator into the 30 amp receptacle, which I use for the motorhome, it didn't recognize it. It kept saying open ground. So I did some research and I discovered a couple things, and we'll go over those. And this will pretty much work if you're in a similar situation with an RV or motorhome that shows an open ground situation. We can go over that, and I'll show you what extra link that I had to go to make this thing work. So we'll be back in a minute. The first thing we're going to address when we're on the subject of the generator is when you look at your generator and you look at the location of your 30 amp plug or your 20, 15 amp, 120 volt plugs, keep in mind how you're going to plug them in. I have a 50 amp plug on my RV, and then I drop it down to 30 amps because at my home right now I just have a 30 amp RV plug on the side of the house, so I can plug it in there, not a problem. I can run about 2 ACs off of there, and it'll do the job to keep it cool or run whatever I need to in the RV while it's sitting here without running any generator. But when I'm out and about, I always want to use the 30 amp. The way the plug fits in, on this generator, you got 2 breakers right down here. So what you want to do is you want to plug it in, but you don't want the cord to drop down directly in front of these, and it'll block it. That's what I found out on when I started plugging things in. Also, on your 110 volt plugs, sometimes you don't get the straight plug in. You got one that's a 90-degree drop, and then it gets involved in these buttons, or if you turn it upside down, it hits one of the breakers of the buttons. So just be aware of how you're plugging things in. You're gonna have to buy adapters, and that's what I'm gonna do right now. Here's my 30 amp to 110 volt, well, 30 amp to 15, 20 amp plugs. So what you can see is, if you're going to plug this, or try to plug this into here, the case is getting in the way of the plug plugging in fully. So that doesn't work. So I had one of these 3-way plugs at home that spaces it out far enough that I could take with me and just plug this in here if I was using the 20 amp plug, which I'm not most of the time, but if I need to, I have the ability to do that. So, but if I'm doing that, obviously I'm not going to be using the 30 amp because that's in the way anyway. So if you're either going to use one or the other, usually you can maybe use this and one other, but I wouldn't be plugging the RV into both of them, so that wouldn't matter. For my 30 amp, I chose this plug-in adapter I'm going to put on the cord. We'll see why I picked this one. Not for number 1 because it comes apart, and for number 2, when the wire comes out, it's not going to interfere with my breakers down here or anything else. So that's why I picked this. This one's from Camco. Most of the RV plugs and stuff I buy is just Camco. It's a good brand, and it's proven in the industry, so it's good. So now we get down to the nuts and bolts of what's going on. You have a lot of these generators have floating grounds, the inverter generators. Floating ground means that your neutral and your ground aren't bonded together. So what everybody pretty much does is they just go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever else and just buy a male plug for 110. And what you do, right inside of there, I've got a number 10 wire jumper that goes from the neutral to the ground. That's all it is. It's just on 2 pins, the neutral and the ground. And then what you do with that is you plug this into your generator, And the theory is if all the receptacles, which is these two, are wired together, then if you plug this in, then it gives the neutral ground bonding in all the receptacles. But in my case, that didn't work. If I plug this in and then I plug my motorhome into this bottom receptacle, everything will work, it'll recognize it, and I won't get the open ground. But if I plug this in here into the 20 amp circuit, and then I plug my RV into this 30 amp plug, I'll still get the open ground. So that tells me that these two aren't wired together in the generator, which is fine, they're fed separately. So what I'm going to do is fix this issue so that I can use this receptacle without having the open ground situation on my motorhome. The most cost-efficient way to do what I need to do is I went online on Amazon and I purchased a Camco 50 amp female plug that plugs into my RV with a 30 amp male on the other end. Now the only thing that really sucks is the fact that it says it's 12 inch, but it's 12 inches from this end to this end. So the actual cord is not very long. I'm going to cut a little bit of it down, so it's even going to be a little bit shorter. But you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to plug in your RV and then move this around to get to this end to get to your plug on your generator, which my generator has the ground on the top, just like this. So that's how it's going to plug in. So I'm going to take this off, this molded plug off, because I can't change anything on the interior of this. So I'm going to take this molded plug off and bare the wires and then mount this plug on the end of this. First thought was to remove the front plate on this new generator that I got and make the wiring changes behind here in this plug. But after taking most of it apart, it just became such a chore. I didn't want to tear anything up, and I figured it's just going to be easier for me to make the changes on the plug, and I'll just mark that plug for portable generator. Just use it for that. I've got another plug I'll use for my house, my original one. So all I'll have to do is it's probably a cost of about 25 bucks total, or $30, to make this change in the wiring. So I don't have to change anything in the generator, because this is the only thing that I'm going to have a problem with. And if I did have a problem with something else, then I've got the adapter to make it work. I've actually got two adapters, one for the 20, one for the 30. So that works out either way. I didn't lose too much of the cord. I cut it off right before the receptacle and then split the chase where it goes in, stream relief, and then got it out right where I cut it. So now we'll start doing some wiring. Okay, what I did was I did the wiring, and then I ran a jumper from the ground to the neutral. So now we have a bonded neutral in this adapter. It goes from the 50 amp from the motorhome to the generator. Okay, I've got the generator running, and I plugged my little homemade 30 amp pigtail. This is the 50 amp plug coming from the RV, and this is the 50 amp female adapter, and then this is the one that I have the jumper from the ground to the neutral. And I wrote Gen on there, so I know that this plugs into my generator. So I'm going to plug this in here. All right, plugged into the generator. Now we'll do, we're going to go in the motorhome. Now before, when I looked at the control panel, the rear control panel said open ground, but the interior control panel wouldn't even recognize it. So it didn't do anything. So what we're going to do is pop up here, look at it. Okay, you see that? What it's doing is it recognized it as 30 amps, and what it's doing is just figuring out the load the Smart EMS is. So when we got to this point, that means that it is accepted the power from the generator to that 30 amp plug using our bond jumper from neutral to the bond, which is the ground. And now what it's going to do is it's showing that we're charging. So right now, once it runs that, it'll probably end up stopping at like 1 or 2 amps because we don't really have much of a load on the battery right now. Okay, so it's finally done. Now it shows it's 30 amps and it's only pulling one amp right now. Everything's available. So right now, everything's working on the generator, and that's exactly what I was looking for. So there's that's what we needed to do. So for my personal situation, $35 maybe it cost me. Bought this tail, put the new end on with the jump wire in it, and I already had this male plug. Just put a jumper wire in there for the 20 amp plugs, and then this spacer for the plugging in my adapter for 20 amps from the RV. So good to go. Got any questions? Write them in the comment section and I'll give you a hand, but that should pretty much take care of any generator that's not connecting to your RV or equipment. Talk to you later.